Joining us now to review and analyze the current situation inside Russia and what it means for Ukraine, I'm joined now by Aurel Braun. He's a professor of international relations and political science at the University of Toronto. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. What do you make about this sudden deal brokered by Lukashenko, and where does this leave Wagner?
It is ironic that Alexander Lukashenko, who has his own problems in Belarus, now has been used, it seems, to mediate, to try to de-escalate this conflict that is taking place inside Russia. And we have to ask, what is the end game in this? Because Vladimir Putin went on television, and in his 5-minute address, he said that this was treason, this was a betrayal, this was a stab in the back. Consequently, how could it be justified then to allow Prigozhin and the Wagner group to continue in any kind of independent form, or for Prigozhin personally to be free? The way Vladimir Putin has ruled this, he has to show that he has absolute power. He needs to crush Prigozhin, but he hasn't been able to do that. And Prigozhin has frontally challenged many of the assumptions that were made by the Vladimir Putin government. So, for example, he came out, Prigozhin, to say that this is not a special military operation, that this is a war. Second, he challenged the premise that this was a necessary war, said it was an unneeded war. And third, he deplored the conduct of the war, that it was so badly pursued that the head of the Defense Department, Mr. Shoigu, needs to resign, and that General Gerasimov, the chief of staff, also needs to give up his position. These are absolutely frontal challenges that point to a deep set of structural problems within the Russian military establishment and within the ability of Vladimir Putin to rule. It raises questions for allies as to how reliable an ally Russia can be under Vladimir Putin. Just how problematic is Russia as an unstable state, even though it appeared to be tightly controlled and stable until recently.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder if Prigozhin can even survive this and remain an instrumental part of, the internal military, operation led by Putin. And then I'm wondering, sir, how do you think Putin responds to this? Has he been weakened by the events of the last 24 hours?
He absolutely has been weakened, because any challenge to that kind of rule that depends on the perception of invincibility is something that is ultimately very deleterious. And consequently, Vladimir Putin has to demonstrate that he has absolute power. And it's hard to envision how he can do that without utterly crushing Prigozhin. But Prigozhin is backed up not only by the Wagner group, but we saw that when he and his forces moved into the large city of Rostov, the military that was supposed to resist him basically was passive at best, or maybe even collaborated. That is disturbing from the perspective of how effective the Russian military is, how well controlled it is by the Kremlin.
Yes.
It is something that ought to worry the Putin leadership a great deal.
And sir, Ukraine has obviously been watching these developments very closely. How do you think these events play out for Kyiv? Does it benefit from the military debacle inside Russia?
The Ukrainians have paid a very heavy price for the Russian invasion, and there are operations that have cost Ukrainians a great deal in lives and equipment, as it has indeed in the case of Russia. So this war is far from over. But the indications that we are getting that the corruption that exists in Russian society has spread to the military, that in fact there are internal fissures that are this important, would tend to indicate that time is not on Vladimir Putin's side, and that consequently, with enough support, Ukraine has an opportunity to prevail. And I think this is something that the Kremlin government and any allies should take note.
Yeah, there is definitely a lot more to come with this story. Thank you, Aurel Braun, for your perspective.
Thank you for having me on.